Hello and welcome back to another video from Ad-Apt. On today's video, we're going to be talking about the importance of your hosting plan, your hosting infrastructure, your hosting software, and all that good stuff on the back end that makes your site work well, load fast, rank highly in search engines, and most importantly, convert new prospects into your business. So stay tuned. All right, guys. So first up, I think the title is self-explanatory, but choosing the right hosting plan for your website is going to be critical to your success because if you don't have the proper hosting foundation, you're really not going to succeed at anything else with your online marketing efforts because you are sending people into a place that doesn't load correctly, is not secure, is not fast, and ultimately is going to undermine all your other efforts. Brian, before we dive in, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, hosting's probably the most underappreciated aspect of your website. Understanding the right hosting plan for your particular needs and apps and the customizations and integrations you have on your website, all of those factor into the hosting plan you have. So it's very important you understand your options when you're selecting a hosting plan.
All right, let's dive right in. So first up, we just want to give you an introduction of what we're going to cover because not everything might be applicable to you, but I think all of these aspects are important to your success on the internet as it pertains to marketing and acquiring new customers. So we're going to be covering the servers, the software, the security, some support and backup services that I think are important to anybody with an online business, and most importantly, not to be overlooked, the cost. You really want to keep these factors in mind when you're making a hosting decision because you might think you're saving 10 bucks or $5 a month, but at what cost? You might be saving that $5, and so it seems like your costs are going down. But if you even miss out on one quality lead or one additional e-commerce sale, it's actually costing you a lot more to not have the proper hosting environment for your project than it would be if you just paid for the correct resources. So let's jump in here and tackle these servers. What is a server? I think people really get confused by these words, but it's pretty simple to use the analogy of a house, which everybody would be familiar with. But your server is really like your address. It's the dirt in which your house is constructed. If your website is that house, you're going to need a good foundation and paint and walls and insulation and all those aspects that make a great house livable and a good place to have guests come by. But if you build your house on a marsh or on a tar pit or on a cliffside, you're running into some risks that really have nothing to do with your house. And so your hosting server is where that house lives. That is where the internet will send the traffic to. That's where the mailman is going to come to bring you your emails. It's where your website visitors are going to come to explore what your product or service is. And so you really want to make sure that hosting server is the correct machine, is the correct place for your site to live because there is an infinite number of choices and options here, and most are overkill for most folks. But if you don't have the right infrastructure, you're really going to suffer. Brian, any thoughts on that before we dive into these three components here?
I think you had a great analogy. I just think maybe if I just explain, hopefully, a little bit of the technical components of what this means, it'll give you a little bit more context. So essentially, when you're building a website is just a sequence of files, text files, if you were to simplify it. And you need to put those somewhere. You need to save them in folders and put them onto a computer. In order for it to show up on the internet and serve up fast and work well, there are dedicated computers, which are these servers that host those files, that store those files into one computer. And then that computer has specific resources such as the CPU, the RAM. That's how fast the files get uploaded, how fast the computer will process those files. So essentially, when we're talking about a server, we're talking about a computer somewhere else that has all the files for your website. And that computer has very specific resources in order to pull up your website and files and images as quickly, effectively as possible.
Yeah, said I'm going to piggyback off that even further. I think People really get confused. Everything is a computer. The core architecture of what's happening is the same. I'm on a computer right now, and the monitor that I'm looking at is connected to that computer. So I can save things on it and access it. It's displayed to me on this monitor. But if I were to move the monitor 1,000 yards away from me and have a really long cable that connected to it, would it still be a computer? Yes. What if I moved it 1,000 miles away from me and I communicated with it over the internet or Wi-Fi? Is it still a computer? Yes. What if I took the monitor away entirely and all I did was store files on it and I just asked that computer to display those files to me over the internet on my own monitor that's not actually connected to that computer anymore physically? Okay, now that's the server. There's no real difference to it. It has memory where you store long-term storage. It has short-term memory, which is called RAM, that uses something that's active or people are requesting now. And you have a CPU. That's how smart your computer, how many calculations it can do per second. So if you're a big gamer and you're watching this, you know that having the best computer and graphics card is going to give you the best experience when interfacing with your game or when you're doing a lot of processing. And the same thing applies to your server that hosts your website or host your app or whatever else that you're putting in the cloud. Beat this topic to death a little bit, but let's take a look at these three bullets and make sure that we don't address them. The server we've really covered, that is at this point, 9 times out of 10 in the cloud, powered by Microsoft, Google, or Amazon in some gigantic server farm. And you're going to rent that space from them. You're going to rent that machine from them and put your stuff on it. In the past, probably before YouTube and probably before the time of most folks watching this video, but people used to have server closets physically in their own building. So there'd be like a closet in your business's real estate that would have a bunch of high-powered computers, and Comcast or AT&T would basically come connect to that server closet to make your stuff available online. And if the power went out or you didn't pay your internet bill, your site, your files, your stuff is coming off the internet. That was how it was in the past. Now everything's in the cloud. It's up to Google, Microsoft, and Amazon to maintain that hardware so that the stuff never comes down. So that's your server, that's your hardware. It's in the cloud. The second sort of piece here is what Brian basically touched on, but what are the attributes of that hardware? Does it have enough RAM? Does it have enough CPU power? Does it have enough storage? If your users are uploading a lot of images or music or video, you're going to need a lot of long-term storage. It's going to fill up quick. And so that'd be a different server infrastructure than, say, somebody who just has a text-based blog. And last but not least, what is up with the customization aspects? You can set your own security protocol. We were working with a client the other week that had a HIPAA concern because they had a particular project that contained sensitive information about medical patients, and they needed an entirely different customization on their piece of hardware so that they were in compliance with those HIPAA regulations. Again, 9 times out of 10, that won't be applicable to most people watching this video or working with us on their hosting. But it is important to note that you don't just buy a server and it's done. You can configure it, put software on it, put libraries on it, and give it all the bells and whistles to do exactly what it is that you need your server to do for you and your project. Bottom line here, take a look at the bottom of this slide. If you don't have the right hardware, your performance is really going to suffer, and that is the long and the short of it. Moving on. Up next, let's talk about the software that you actually put on that machine, because the software is really how your site works, and it's important to have the right software on the machine so that your site or your application is working as you expect. Without the right software, you could have the world's best hardware and it's not going to function correctly. The software is what's going to help balance the load, make sure things work well across various requests that are all happening at the same time. How is the machine going to handle 1,000 people asking for the same resource at that exact same moment? And is it secure? So if hardware is just silicon wafers and transistors and a physical machine in the sky, your software is what's the code that's been put on that machine that helps your project work and run properly in the cloud. Brian, take it away from here. Maybe you can touch on some of these three attributes that we look when dealing with hosting software.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the software, there's a lot of different ways that we can approach it. It really depends on the needs of the site. Let's say, for example, A site needs to display well on desktop, mobile. It also may have a mobile application that needs to connect to the information that is on the website. All of that requires very specific software to process the coding that's in place for those files that we're uploading, and also to display and process images and user information properly. The other thing that's important about this is you want to install software and have a set amount of pieces that the people that manage your hosting understand and can access, and also can transfer the information from one web developer to another, and everyone understands the same language, so to speak. So when you install software, it's also about approaching with best industry practices, so that if for whatever reason someone else needs to go in there and make an edit, or you need to transfer it out, other people understand what's in there. I think if we jump into the next piece, when we talk about security, a lot of the software that we will install or that comes with a hosting package focuses on encrypting information, so that if someone visits the website, they can also store the information in a way that other people can't hack into it. So security is a big part of it. Also, having full control of the server from an admin perspective, meaning you can edit the files, delete things, make backups. There's software that is applied to that. And then lastly, as far as maintenance is concerned, there's software that can be applied to the machine that will automatically back up your information, so that just in case your data may be hacked one day or may be compromised on a specific day, you can always revert back to an older version. And there's a lot of different kind of security and maintenance features around that.
Said, I think the depth and complexity on this slide could take us hours to go through, but it's really not applicable to the vast majority of people that need a hosting resource for their project. We're going to touch on a few just because it's obviously a critical component, but the number one hosting software that's out there these days is a word I'm sure everybody's heard of, which is WordPress. Now, that's not hosting software. What I mean by that is WordPress is a package of software that you're going to put on that piece of hardware that's going to allow you to serve up, manage, and run your website. It's definitely the most popular content management system in the world, and it's going to allow you to deploy something quickly. But you might have your own custom application that you wrote in PHP or Python or React or any number of the libraries that are designed to host a website. But the bottom line is most folks just need something simple that they can put up on the internet that is, that basically serves as a brochure to talk about their products, their services, and their business in general. I think what Brian alluded to is probably the most important aspect of this, which is the security and the maintenance. If you don't maintain your code base, and I don't mean you personally, I just mean someone, many hosting providers will do it for you. There was PHP 2, then there was 3, then there was 4, then there was 5, etc. The library keeps evolving to patch up exploits, other issues. It can run faster. And so you really don't want to be on an old version of WordPress, running an old version of PHP or Apache on an old machine that has old security features, because the hacking community or the folks that are out there on the internet are looking for those exploits. So if WordPress releases a security patch or an update to its code base, it is a lot of times in response to a particular exploit that was available in the past. They released that new software. All you got to do is double click and update it to protect yourself. And so it's really critical to have that maintenance going. Otherwise, you are falling behind and taking on more and more risk by not keeping it updated. There's a ton of services that you can get right out of the box. We use a service called Cloudflare, which is a fantastic service for making things not only fast, but secure and stay up and online, even in the event of a hack or a DOS attack, which is probably not going to happen to most folks, but is a common thing on the internet. And so you really want to keep your eye on this hosting software equation to make sure it's at least up to date and secure. Otherwise, you're going to wake up one day and unfortunately have some like Viagra links on your site, or your user database would have been downloaded and compromised. We worked with a client who had a security issue running an open source tool called WooCommerce, and we had a wonderful machine in the cloud secure, hardened, well built, loaded the site very quickly. But a particular person on the team added a compromised WordPress plugin to the site. It exposed a hole. Hackers looking for that hole found it and went in and hacked the site. We lost access to it. The user information was compromised. Some people lost some credit card details and things like that. And it just goes to show that you need to understand the software that you're putting on your machine, because it's either helping you or hurting you in regards to the security or the maintenance side of things. Don't lose sleep over it. 9 times out of 10, it's no big deal, but you always want to make sure on a monthly basis or a regular basis that you're keeping all your software updated. If you work with a managed hosting provider, they're going to do that for you. Or if you have a server architect or an engineer on your team, that's their job to keep that updated for you. Don't overlook it. One day it's going to come back and bite you in the butt and cause big problems if you don't keep a close eye on it. Let's take a look at the next slide. Web security. We touched on this in the past, but it's not, we touched on this on the previous slide, but it's not just about the software. There's other services that are used to encrypt data that goes over the internet, the most common of which is SSL. You will see in the browser that nice kind of green lock symbol next to your URL when you have a valid SSL certificate that protects your data. What you really don't want to do is have somebody fill out a credit card form on your website and hit submit, and that information without any encryption goes up in the air underneath the Pacific Ocean to some server and comes back. It's just right for people to intercept that data and use it in a nefarious way. SSL certificates are really important. Firewalls are a term that most people have heard of, but it's really used just to protect your website from malicious attacks. So if you're selling cupcakes in Cleveland, you really don't need traffic from Afghanistan or Pakistan. And if you see 100 visitors come from, let's say, a Russian IP address over the course of a minute, it's probably not a good set of customers looking to buy cupcakes in their local market. It's probably a bot or someone that's trying to penetrate your hosting environment and steal something from you or cause problems. So having a correct firewall configured is going to keep those folks at bay and keep your stuff secure and served up for the folks that actually need it. And the third component here is just backups. For our clients, we do take a daily backup. We store those backups for up to 14 days. And the reason for that is you might not notice that you've been compromised right on day one. It might not be brought to light until day 3, day 4, when something starts to go wrong. And you want to be able to roll back very quickly to the latest stable version of your site before that hack. So if something really gets blown up on your site and you catch it at 7 in the morning, you want to be able to click one button and wait for about 3 or 4 minutes for your site to roll back to the version of your site that was loaded up, let's say 2 days ago, that you knew was stable, knew had the information, didn't have the spammy links and the hack on it. And so you could have the best SSL, best firewalls in the world, but if you get hacked and your stuff gets deleted, there's no magic undo button. It's gone. And so having those backups be stored in a different location, not subject to the same exploits, is going to allow you to protect that information, stay secure, and roll it back, stay one step ahead of those hackers that might be trying to cause you some issues. Brian, what do you think?
Very well explained. I think another example alluding to the green lock on the browser, maybe you've seen it, but when you browse on certain websites and they don't have a SSL certificate, what do you see? It says website not secure, continue at your own risk. And if you have your own website and you haven't installed an SSL certificate, now imagine the user's experience of someone visiting your website. The first thing they see is something saying this is not secure. So if for nothing else, just for the user experience, this is one of the most important aspects. But of course, this is actually very important as far as keeping all the user information secure on the website and that their user experience is safe when they purchase on your site or they download information or they enter their phone number. It's all encrypted. And that's what we want to make sure when it comes to your hosting on your website.
Yeah, you could imagine going to a concert or going skiing or something and trying to get a locker to put your stuff in. And if you put your stuff in the locker and there's a big sign that said, hey, warning, this is not locked and not secure. Are you sure you want to put your stuff in here? You're not going to take them up on that offer. You're going to find something that is secure. So that's what your customers are going to think about your website. If the very first thing they are seeing are shown by something that they trust, which is Google, and it says, warning, don't go here. That is not the best first impression you want to have for your potential clients visiting your site. And furthermore, this is a ranking signal on Google. And what we mean by that is if you don't have SSL, if your images are not secure, if that warning is in place, Google is going to knock you down a little bit. They do not want to send traffic to insecure places. If your place is insecure, don't expect Google to send you the traffic. So get the SSL certificate dialed in, make sure you got a decent firewall, and take daily backups. SSL, it's not crazy complicated. SSL certificates these days can be, in fact, free. I think you can go to freecert.com or freesslcert.com, and those SSL certificates are, in fact, provided to you for free. When we host a client's website, we do get all three of these things going right away before anything makes it onto the internet so that we know not only are we secure going forward, but in the worst case event, if something does happen, we have a backup to bring it back online quickly and address those issues. Moving on here, I think it's important to have some support. Everybody who tries to do anything on the internet has probably heard of GoDaddy, and GoDaddy may or may not have award-winning support, depending on how you want to phrase that. If you call them, they'll answer, but somewhat baked into their answers, into the emails, into their checkout experience is the never-ending upsell to buy something else that's $3 a month or $8 a month, or hide your domain information for privacy for $20 a year. Some of it's good, some of it's not necessary, but the important thing is that most folks don't have physical access to their machine. So they need someone to support it. That's either going to be automation or some software that does it for you, or a real live human is going to be able to answer some of those questions for you. We believe it's worth paying for support. Most folks who run cupcake stores in Cleveland are not going to be hosting experts, nor should they be. They should focus on making the best and most cupcakes for their customers and leave the hosting support to the professionals. At this point, it's relatively straightforward. It's not rocket science on how to support a very basic machine that serves up a WordPress website. But if you don't have that support, a hack or some downtime that should only last 15 minutes might last 15 days. So how many cupcakes do you sell in 15 days? Because if your site's down, you're not selling those, and that can be a real challenge. Brian, I don't want to take up all the hot air here. If you want to jump into these three, I'll piggyback off your points here and see if you missed anything on these topics here.
Yeah, I think when you're searching for a hosting provider, these are the three main things you want to think about or ask. The question is, how reliable is the hosting service? So what's the consistency of uptime? That even some of the biggest sites in the world crash. They either get too much information, too many people visiting. I think even Facebook this year was down for about 31 minutes. And that's because of varying issues. It could be a lot of people visiting the site all at once. It could have been a lot of people processing video or files all at once. You need a hosting provider that is able to handle that and be able to adjust on the fly and quickly so that your site gets right back up. With that being said, is the hosting plan scalable? If you have a website that all of a sudden you make a promotion, you run some ads, and you bring in additional traffic more than what you're used to for a given period of time, can that hosting plan adjust? Can it scale up and to the level of traffic and the growth of your business? And then lastly, as Lucas alluded to, sometimes hosting services, while they may provide very affordable hosting plans, they may not have actual humans or people you can speak to handle your issues. So let's say your website does go down. Who's going to answer? If you have to go through a bunch of loops or hoops to try to run through in order to get an answer from someone, your site might be down for a very long time, and that may be affecting the performance of maybe a potential promotion you might be having. I could imagine this has happened to a few people in the past. They had a kind of very poor hosting plans that had a restriction on the amount of traffic that they could have at a given time. And since that plan was not scalable, they ran a promotion, drove a bunch of people to the website, and all of a sudden the website crashes, and this very short-term promotion that was just for one day only, you might be missing out on sales for, even if it's 10 minutes, it's already detrimental to the business. Having humans that you can call right away, people that can jump on and handle this issue is super important to have. So you want to make sure you're able to have a high level of support and also be reassured on the reliability of the hosting service, how consistent is the uptime, and how scalable is the platform depending on how much traffic and information is being processed on your website on a daily basis.
So I'm going to do my best to unfortunately burst everybody's bubble here. Cheaper is not better. We've talked about all these attributes of your hosting infrastructure, but I think it's best explained by these three bullets here: reliability, scalability, and humans. 99% of the time, folks that we work with are hosted on what's called a shared hosting plan. So if you walk in the front door with HostGator, GoDaddy, Bluehost, any of these folks, the absolute cheapest plan is going to be what's called shared hosting. And that just means you have one machine, one piece of hardware, one machine, one piece of hardware with one set of softwares on it that you cannot configure, that is blanket level secured, blanket level firewalled, blanket level supported, but there might be two, four, 500 different people all on that same machine at the same time. That's why it's called shared hosting. So now let's look at these three things that Brian just described, and I think you're going to see what the problem is. Reliability. If you're site number 7 on a shared hosting plan and person number 11 decides to make the front page of Reddit, do a big promotion, if they get hacked by a bunch of Russian spam bots, the resources on the machine that you are on will be consumed by now the thirstiest, loudest resource on that machine, which is going to be the other client. So your site will go slow. Your site might come down. If the machine itself is brought down because of client 8 and your client 7, you're also going down. You get what you pay for. Let's look at scalability. If a flood of traffic hits that same shared resource, in theory, your shared hosting provider is going to, in real time, scale up the resources, clone the machine, make it bigger, make it faster, so that their other clients are not affected by this big spike in traffic. Good luck with that. I hope it works. That might get resolved in 5 minutes or maybe 50 minutes. The bottom line is what you're getting for $5 a month, $10 a month is divided across hundreds of people, hundreds of resources, hundreds of differing strategies and timing and time zones and stuff like that. And what that hosting provider really wants from you is a extremely low traffic website that nobody visits, that they can tuck into the corner of their little serving plant of their server and give you the least amount of RAM, least amount of CPU, least amount of uptime, and throttle your visitors as much as possible so that they can charge 1,000 people $10 a month. That's $10,000 a month for a machine that only costs them $500 a month to keep up and online. And if they cross their fingers and nobody complains and nobody knows this information, then that is an extremely profitable hosting account for them. They'd rather make a ton of money off the small guys and let you suffer, because your only solution is, after that, what can I do? Well, they're going to tell you to pay more to move up to the next level, which is a virtual private machine. I get a sneaky feeling that this is coming up on one of these next slides, but I think it's important to address it now. Maybe we can go into more detail if it comes up. But you have a virtual private machine, which is basically saying, okay, I might be on the same hardware, but I'm going to carve out these resources: specific amount of RAM, specific amount of hardware, specific amount of power, let's say, to host my site. That might be $30 a month to $70 a month, depending on where you get it from. It's your own little corner of a shared, bigger, better machine. Like, you're on a Lamborghini, that's great, but you get the back seat's always yours. You don't get the whole Lamborghini, but you're always going to be in the back seat. There'll always be a chair for you. If you need to go 100 miles an hour, 200 miles an hour, we'll take you there. But if you don't, we're going to leave you in idle in the parking lot here in that back seat. And there's a couple other people in the car with you, and they got their own places to go as well. That's the middle plan. And then you have, last but not least, a dedicated hosting environment. I referenced in the past, people used to have their own servers in their closet. This is the same analogy, but now in the cloud. You're going to go to Microsoft, Google, and Amazon and say, this exact machine with this exact hardware, this configuration that I am indicating I would like. I want to pay for that. I want you to maintain it in your facility somewhere in Washington, let's say, in that server farm, but that's my box. And if I want to make it bigger, I can. If I want to protect it a certain way that I can. If I want to turn it off, I can. Turn it back on, I can. That's a dedicated machine. And that's what you really want ultimately. You don't need it if you have cupcakes in Cleveland as your offer, but if you have any type of custom app, any type of high trafficked website, it's just so critical to serve up a good experience to your visitors. And that's going to come from that dedicated hosting environment. If you have a dedicated host, it's a catch 22 because they're saying you are the human. You're going to maintain your own machine. We'll make sure that it's got power. We'll make sure it functions in our server farm. But how it works, what software is on it, that's on you. And the ideal state is that you can grow from shared host to virtual private host to your own dedicated machine and learn along the way until you actually have your sort of best fit solution in the cloud for you. Moving on here, backups and restoration. We've already addressed this on a previous slide, but I think it's pretty important because some of these aspects come up depending on what your use case is for hosting and what you're trying to do on the internet. Backup and restoration, that's what we talked about already, bringing the site back on if it has issues. Technical support, that's more or less, hey, when I try to add a plugin or I try to do this on my machine, something breaks. Why does it break? Let's check the server logs and what the machine itself is telling us is the issue. It usually doesn't show up in the browser. Somebody with some technical expertise has to look into that. And that's where those technical support services come in. Uptime, performance, and evaluation and those types of services. We mentioned Cloudflare. It's a really great service. There's another service called New Relic as well. Really wouldn't recommend that unless you have an application and you really need to track detailed use of your server. But how often is your site up? What is your page load time for the nth visitor at 1 a.m. coming from Serbia? You want to know those stats? You want to know when people get a 404 error or a soft notice that sometimes you'll see 503 gateway error. And that means, hey man, you didn't load the thing fast enough. It crashed. You could refresh and it could load perfectly your very next attempt, but your server knows how often that 503 error is happening. You want to be checking those resources on how often that's happening, figure out what feature were they on, what did the user request, what were they visiting that caused that issue. There's probably a little bug in your code somewhere or something else that's tripping it up. Security and firewall, we touched on that as well. Need SSL, period. You're sending information to and from your browser. You're asking customers to chat with you to and from the browser. You need the SSL. Firewall is going to help you on the server side prevent people from smashing their way in and causing you trouble that way. And then the data storage and transfer services. All the time we work with clients who say, I'm on BigCommerce and I want to move to WooCommerce. I'm on WooCommerce, I want to move to Shopify. I have a custom build over here that I built out in my basement and now I need to take it live on the proper cloud provider because I'm ready to get customers on it. And so that's the kind of support service that you need to take your localized code base and put it up into the cloud so that everybody can use it. Last thing here, probably too deep for this video, there's a service called Docker. And this was a new learning experience that I went through this year. But Docker is an amazing tool, and it essentially gives you like a clone of what your production environment might be. So if you're going to be on Amazon and you know that your server needs to have Python and MySQL and Postgres and React and have all these features on it, but you're making your site here locally in your local machine, which might have a different type of machine, different CPU. Maybe this is a Windows machine and this is a Linux machine. Are they the exact same? No, they're not. You might dev something out locally, push it to the cloud, and run into issues. People use Docker, and we use Docker because it's so powerful. What it's going to do is make a snapshot of what that production server looks like, exactly all of its attributes, and clone it down here on your local machine. So that when you dev things out, you make changes here locally, you have confidence that when you push them to the cloud, that everything's going to work because you, in fact, have a mirror image of your production environment locally. That is the cool way to dev things out. That's what all the Silicon Valley guys are doing. And so if you're doing anything custom, working on an application, let's say, that's in the cloud, not just a vanilla WordPress website, that's the way you want to get set up. I would start with Docker first to address your production and versioning environments going to and from local to the cloud. It's going to help you out with a lot of these attributes here. Brian, what I miss?
No, I think that you covered it all. Really, what the context of the slide is just to try to show you basically what you're paying for as far as the hosting service and what the actual team is doing behind the scenes. So, are they capable of restoring your website? Are they capable of handling technical requests where, as Lucas stated, if there's a plugin that you're trying to add or there's something that you're trying to enable on the website and it's not working, can someone talk to you and guide you through it? Can someone make sure and check on a regular basis that your website is loading up properly and the resources are showing up and working as efficiently as possible? And can even provide guidance on, hey, maybe you're ready for the next stage or paying for a little bit more storage may be helpful to keep your site running as fast and effectively as possible. And of course, security and firewall. We've talked about that plenty enough. And then data storage and transfer services, as Lucas stated, which is there might be scenarios where you might want to transfer a website in or transfer information out. Having someone that understands those ins and outs, understanding how to store, export the information, transfer it over properly, and display the website accordingly are all things that require humans and people to oversee this. So when you're selecting a service, is understanding their capabilities, and these are basically the critical services that you need to pay attention to.
Say it so much more concise than I do, Brian. Well done, sir. So let's look at the cost of your monthly hosting. Now, we did talk about these plans, so I'm not going to go into the details here, but we've already spoke on just the complications and limitations of each. The shared hosting is going to be your cheapest. A lot of people start out there. You're not wrong for starting out there. If you just need a simple brochure site or you're really on a budget, there's no shame in starting out with shared hosting as long as you know what you're going into and what you're going to get out of it. All the time we talk to folks about hosting and they say, that's crazy. I can't believe you guys charge $40 a month, $70 a month, $100 a month for your hosting services. GoDaddy offers hosting for $5. You guys are crazy. Okay. It literally is not, it's not apples to apples. It's not even apples to oranges. These two services are so far apart that they are not to be compared. The absolute discount bin to be putting the lifeblood of your digital success in marketing, operations, branding, you are putting that into a bucket that costs you $5 a month. You have to really take a step back and evaluate whether or not that is the appropriate amount of resources to contribute to the house in which your business lives on the internet. If if a $5 house with $5 worth of food and $5 for your alarm and a $5 lock on the door and $5 of internet and $5 of electricity is enough for you to survive as a business owner, then man, more power to you. 9 times out of 10, it's not enough. 9 times out of 10, it's costing you so much more in loss of business, loss of success than you're saving in your monthly fees. So shared hosting, bare minimum, virtual private network, probably the best fit for most people. The kind of Goldilocks porridge in the middle here is going to be the best fit for most. And I would recommend, even if you're starting out with a brand new project, it's almost easier just to start right there because eventually you're going to grow to that point. You're going to incur new fees, new efforts, new engineers talking to you about what it's going to cost to move and upgrade, etc. You want to put yourself in a position similar to a house. If you know you're going to have kids, you want to try to buy the house that's going to support those kids now, even if you don't have them, because the kids are coming. You need those extra bedrooms, you need the extra bathrooms, you need the extra space. Plan that out now. It's not a big deal to spend an extra $40 a month for a year, even if you don't need that much power or resources, knowing that one day you will. And last but not least, you have dedicated hosting, which is where you want to be if you're a professional. If your business makes more than, let's say, $500,000 a year in revenue, there's reason to be on a dedicated host. That's an arbitrary figure that I'll put out there, but if your business is worth it to you, trust me, the investment in hosting is going to be worth it as well. Brian, what do you think?
I think there's a good recap of kind of the typical fees you'll see. I think you've explained the different level of hosting. I think we have a slide later on that we talk about our recommendations as far as what traffic to consider, or benchmarks to consider if you're going to jump from one level to the next and when you're ready. But I think we covered very well what you're paying for here. and what to consider.
I'll throw one on here that didn't even make this slide, which is above this shared hosting is free hosting. GoDaddy Instapage, your free Wix account, your free Squarespace. Hey guys, by all means, if you want your business to live on essentially a parked advertisement for the hosting provider that is giving you that Instapage, by all means. But it's just budget and not trustworthy. That how can your prospects take you seriously if down at the bottom of your footer, the investment that you've made in communicating with them and presenting your offer is articulated by a little logo that says free website hosting powered by GoDaddy? It's got to be the most off-putting thing for anybody who knows to look for that. Some folks might not see it. Maybe no one, your particular audience doesn't care. Anybody that's in the digital space is going to see that and say, this person doesn't care about their business, doesn't care about their brand. And it's accurate. You care about your brand and your business and your online presence exactly $0. So think about that before you make that choice. Here's a key quote here, guys. 99.9% uptime guarantee is the key to finding the right website hosting plan for your WordPress website. And what I mean by that is having your site up and available 99.9% should be the baseline. That's not necessarily your target. If your site is down more than that, trust me, if people when they go to your site, click on 10 links or view 10 pages, and you get 10 of those people per day, it's not going to take too long to have 1,000 occurrences of people trying to access your website information. And if you have 99% uptime, if you have 1,000 attempts, one of those people is going to get a 503 error or some type of bug, and your site's going to be, from their perspective, down. How does that make them feel? Not good. Hopefully they can refresh and access the product. But if you're at 95%, just imagine if you had a retail store and it said open for business 9 to 5, or a restaurant, let's say, but for whatever reason 1 in 10 people, when they go to pull the door on your restaurant, it's locked. They're not going to not only come in and spend money with you that time, they are never going to come back. And if Google's bots and the spiders that are out there are one of those customers, they're going to come try to get in your website and be like, this site's down, I'm out of here. They're not going to see your new content. They're going to mark you down as not being reliably up, and they're going to come check on you, not tomorrow, but okay, fine, in 2 weeks. If you're down again in 2 weeks, they're not going to check on you for 2 months. So you're sending the wrong signal to the crawlers, wrong signal to your customers, and you want to have your site up all the time. Seems self-explanatory, but I think nobody really looks at it. If you go look at your Cloudflare report, your Google Analytics report, your Google Search Console report, you likely don't have 99.9% uptime, period. You're serving up errors, even if every time you check, your site looks great to you on your machine, the way you use the internet. That is not the same as somebody with an old version of an iPad trying to look at it from out of state at 1 a.m. And if it goes down for them, or it goes down for Google Spots, that's not you. That counts for your uptime. It's going to hurt your performance. Go ahead, Brian. What do you think?
No, I think you covered it. We keep beating this idea a lot, but overall, you just want to make sure your site is always up. We've explained a couple different examples of how this could drastically affect your business, especially if you're in a growing part of your business, right? If you had a big sale, all of a sudden you get a big spike of traffic, which is great, and you want to be ready for that. So your hosting service, that's probably the most critical point, is when your business finally hits online. And if your hosting messes you up for whatever reason, because it just wasn't prepared for that level of traffic or that level of activity on your website, you missed your chance. So we've seen it happen too many times. So we're going to continue to harp on this. Uptime is probably the most important thing, or the key factor to consider.
You don't want to be tripping over dollars to save pennies. How about that one? So what are our recommendations if you have a tiny little website, not much going on? Okay, fine. You can be on shared hosting. You want to write a cooking blog? Go for it. But if you want to provide critical infrastructure in the sense of my customers rely on this information every day, or I have new people checking this out every single day and they need to access this widget that I built, Do not use dedicated hosting. Probably don't even use the virtual private host. You need to get your real own Lamborghini in the sky. That used to be $5,000 a month. Now it's a couple hundred. It's worth the investment, and you should embrace that. If you're an established website or brand that exists already, at bare minimum, you need that virtual private network. You don't want to be awesome in the real world and suck online, so don't skimp here. Probably reiterated this point at least 50 times so far in this presentation, so hopefully it sinks in. And if you have any sort of custom app or any sort of high volume traffic that comes and goes, a little more unpredictable, a little more volatile of an experience because you built something a little bit different or it operates in a unique way, or period, you have custom code and it needs to work. You can't have your Uber app running correctly and have the mobile app in sync with your database, in sync with the desktop app back to your corporate servers and all that stuff going on. If you don't have your own custom hosting, you don't have your own dedicated hosting environment. So that's really what you need. And in addition to all the hardware aspects, you need to have those critical software components as well to make sure it works. Brian, what do you think?
I think you covered it.
Boom. So in conclusion, guys, if you need help with any of this stuff, choosing a website, hosting provider, we are at your service. I think at this point, we're hosting maybe 80 or 90 sites. We are not a hosting company. We are a marketing company, but because we do marketing, we realize how critical that hosting environment is, and we are absolutely sick and tired of having our marketing results be hindered or slowed down by the hosting environment or the hosting preferences of our end client. So we started offering hosting to our clients maybe 2 years ago and have built out those three sort of areas. We have shared hosting, we have virtual private hosting, and we have dedicated hosting. It comes with full-fledged support. We manage the software, manage the plugins, we manage everything else that is involved with maintaining and keeping that 99% uptime. And drum roll, please, if something goes down, you shoot us an email, drop us a text, and Brian and I and another individual, Chase, are going to jump right on it and fix that up, restore your site from one of our backups, figure out what went wrong, check those server log, figure out what went wrong, check those server logs, and fix it for next time. So if you're looking to launch a new site, launch a new custom application, or you just need help with your own WordPress site specifically, please click the link below. We're happy to do an audit from our side, review your current hosting infrastructure, and get you some stats on what your uptime really is and how it can be improved. So that's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for sticking. So that's it for today, folks. Thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this presentation. Again, if you need help with anything hosted related, just follow that link below, sign up for a free consultation, and Brian and I will get you squared away. This is Ad-Apt and our hosting breakdown signing off.